to another edition of Wampa Radio. This is episode number 23, XXIII, and we are a podcast about Star Wars Unlimited. The card game, the culture, the strategies, the sweet Jats beats that we continue to pump out. How are you doing?
Weekly Jats wailing.
Jats wailing on the regular.
Got done. Just got back from the Jats Club.
Oh, did you?
Which sounds like a club about a League of Legends analyst, but no, it's in fact Star Wars Jazz. In case you maybe missed the week where we had the big Jats music discussion, that is the name in Star Wars for jazz. So there you go. Enjoy. But we'll talk about this episode though. On this episode, we're gonna talk about the aspect of Cunning. That's right. The final aspect to get a preview from Fantasy Flight Games should be fun. We'll decipher what potential archetypes may emerge in Star Wars Unlimited regarding that aspect. But first, we have, as usual, without much further ado, the Wampa Cave poll of the week.
So normally this is Charmer's lead-in. That's his duty.
Yeah.
Besides,
threw me a little bit there.
It was. I figured. I was like, I'm going to trust you with this, Doa. I think that you can handle it. This is the first time I think that it's just you and I without R5D4 and his blown motivator. He is outdoing things, but it's good to keep the schedule chugging along. But yeah, let's talk about the Wampa Cave Poll. The Cave Poll up every Sunday at Wampa Radio on Twitter. This week's question, Doa, was, what kind of card-playing style do you most identify with? The options being control. Are you a control player? There was aggro. Are you an aggressive style player? There's mid-range, where you just want to play the best card on curve at the right time. And finally,
tempo. Yeah,
basically, mid-range, tempo, kind of, the same thing, more or less. And finally, there's combo. Combo is, I have a plan. I'm going to build up to something big, and then we're going to see some fireworks. So, Doa, playing cards for 25 years or so, what kind of style have you just basically slid yourself into?
Since the very, very beginning, the first deck I ever played in any card game was a mono red deck in Magic the Gathering, and I think I played Lightning Bolt once, and I never looked back. So I've been an aggro player, since I can remember, and sometimes that archetype gets frowned upon, Flake, and people call it no brain, people call it just go face, zug, but the fact is that if you're playing aggro, you are playing on a razor's edge from the very first turn, which is what I love about it. I love that you really need to make every move perfectly if you want to win the game, because as soon as you lose control, as soon as you lose momentum, you're kind of done, right? So I like that living on the edge style of aggro play. And that's not to say I haven't, enjoyed other decks from archetypes aside from that, but I tend to lean towards aggro. So that was my choice. Yeah.
Well, those people that you discuss are, in fact, me. I am those people.
I know.
You are the unga bunga smash point click delete kind of brainless scum that I have
smarter than you think.
Like the way that you discuss it, I totally get it. I completely understand with you there. The thing about it is, again, like for myself, it's usually what you have to trudge through in the lower ranks because they're quick games, they resolve fast, so the better players are going to be able to advance. It's just, and as the skill level kind of increases, that's where things kind of slow down, and aggro decks might not be as prominent or prevalent because if they're that good, you're probably facing off against other ones, but you're right, and like the way that you described it versus the way that it's perceived, you're completely correct and accurate in that. I know. Because the way that you described it is you're living on, like, you have no room for error. If that one lightning bolt goes to a unit versus instead of going face, that might be the turning point that becomes dangerous. And mono red deck wins is kind of like the birthplace of that.
Or red. Well, it was called Red Sly back when I started playing it, but that's like late 90s. So, I admit that was a little while ago, at this point. It was tossing my Mog Fanatics out with the damage on the stack back when that happened and all that. The good old days, right? The purer times. of Magic the Gathering. But then again, I was probably playing more Star Wars CCG at the time anyway. But I digress. Yeah, it is a great archetype, and you're more of a control player, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
You. So you're just the guy where it's like someone else is trying to play the game, and you're like, my spell counters your spell. Oh, my spell counters that spell, and then you're just like, well, I guess I've countered all the spells, so here's my huge thing, and there we go. I've played my one card that wins the game. That's how I perceive your archetype. Just no fun, not really even playing the game. That's what control is to me.
So I'm going to not deny that. Like, the spirit of what you're saying is completely true in the sense
stasis exists. Yeah.
Well, like, so again, if I were to sort of push myself into a category of type of player I am, it's probably Esper, like white, red, black, which is white being, life gain and sort of stasis effects and things like that. Black being kill spells, destruction, hand destruction, things like that, and blue being denial and card draw. Like, that's basically what it is, which is going to lead us nicely into our episode here about Cunning. But the joy that I get with it, and this transcends all different card games. Again, in Magic, love playing blue, black, X, be it green or white. Never red. It's almost never red. In Hearthstone, it was in the earliest renditions of it. It was like Frost Mage, like Ice Mage.
I invented that deck, by the way.
You invented the Ice Mage deck?
I invented Frost Mage in Hearthstone. Yeah, it's one of my greatest shames because and I can prove it too, because if you look, you will not find an earlier Frost Mage guide on the internet than my guide on my YouTube channel. It was like a few days into the early beta, so it was the first guide on that deck that came out. Yeah.
So dropping Ice Block, then hitting with the double Fireball. So it's like the Alexstrasza into double Fireball, Frostbolt finisher.
Well, at that time it was a lot of like Antonidas, Unlimited Fireballs.
Oh, right. Antonidas.
But the original intent with that deck was I wanted to way back in Magic, people would build what they referred to back then as direct damage decks, which is where you had no creatures, you only use spells. And so I was curious at that time if I could make a deck in Hearthstone that was no creatures, that was just only spells. And so doing Mage and doing Frost Mage specifically seemed like the most obvious way to put a deck together like that. And it did include creatures, in that included 2 leper gnomes. I think the first version did. I don't even know if the first version included Antonidas, honestly. But the idea was to beat your opponent with only direct damage and not play any creatures at all. So, but then the deck came out and people were like, "Oh, this is just really good to just lock down the game completely." And it was a scourge of the meta for like the first 2 years of the game.
Dude, like one of the original combos was like freeze the board, drop a Doomsayer, and then you get all the tempo.
That was like the first expansion, I think. Was Doomsayer out in the first set?
Doomsayer, I think was in the second set. It might have been the first. I don't know if it was Goblins and Gnomes or if it was that one. All this to say, like, from those days of playing Frost Mage into Control Warrior into like Handlock, all the way through to I'll even say most recently, like up to about this past spring, I was playing Death Knight Control, which again board clears, and I just like it because it's a lot more resource management intensive, because when you're playing Red Deck Wins and you're playing Burn, I get it. Like, the way that you described it is that you're on this fine razor's edge where one false move and you lose, because you'll lose all your tempo, every card in your hand matters. And it's kind of the same with control in certain control variants, because that one counterspell you're holding, you have to then decide, is it worth it to counterspell the 3-drop or wait for something bigger? There's a lot more. You need to almost understand your opponent's deck just as well as your own. And I always appreciated that. And that transcended for me to other games like Gwent or Cards, the World War II card game, Mythgard, all these other decks that had those tools and elements to them to win in the long run. I found a lot more satisfaction in that, and all the way to the fact that, like, this morning, I was playing ranked on Arena, and I was playing Domain Ramp, which has a lot of control elements to it. And they're grindier games, but to me, they feel very rewarding. And not to say that there's no merit in piloting a Red Deck Wins list to just burn face, But to me, the satisfaction out of all four of these is going to be control. Combo sounds fun, but I find like combo is more about digging and crossing your fingers than it is about making sustained amounts of decisions over time.
A lot of combo decks trend towards being more like solitaire is what I would call them, where you're not really interacting with your opponent that much. You're just trying to like manipulate your deck in a way that lets you set up that combo that then you play it and then the game is just kind of over. So there are combo decks that are fun in that you're trying to play a game of sort of like control-y keep away while you set things up. But I feel like for whatever reason in the last like 5 to 10 years of card games, a lot of control combo decks, like I said, lean more towards that just solitaire play style. And I don't like that too much. I don't like the non-interactive decks. So yeah, combo is pretty hit and miss with me lately.
Well, I'm excited to see what Star Wars Unlimited is going to be offering us in terms of these four archetypes. And let's go to the results here. The results being in the lead, the winner of the poll was by a decent chunk, by a solid 10%, is mid-range at 37.4%. Mid-range decks, I'm trying to sort of give, I would say even as much as like Druid in Hearthstone kind of was more ramp oriented, it also wanted to play on curve, but that fact was
a lot
that
of mid-rangey stuff in there.
It just accelerated its curve beyond what you were capable of. But mid-range, I think, is probably what most players play. With that, whether they know it or not, they'll play mid-range. Well, like, you know, on turn 1 you want to play a 1-drop, then a 2-drop, then a 3-drop, then a 4-drop. It's not about okay, I want to dump 4 1-cost spells on turn 4. That's kind of what mid-range is, and it's leading the poll.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that will be a big style of play. And honestly, in a lot of first sets of card games, you see that be kind of the style where you kind of need to just be competing on board because there's not enough support for various archetypes to go all in on one or two kind of ideas. So first sets do end up being kind of mid-range leaning in general, I feel like. And I'd have to go back and look at everything that's revealed to sort of give you my take there. But what I have noticed from the games that I have played is that you do really want to try to play on curve, it feels like, in this game initially, where because the damage is something that sort of like stays, right? So one card can take out 2 smaller cards, if that makes sense. So having that bigger card can be better than playing 2 smaller cards sometimes. So that's a really huge generalization of the idea, but I do think you'll probably want to play on curve quite a bit early on in this game. We'll see. You'll want to play that Wampa, that 4 for 4/5. That's a perfect example of a great tempo-y, mid-rangey kind of card.
What a great card that is. The Wampa is going to be so good.
No bias though.
No bias at all. Second place were the Cultured Ones with Control at 27.3%. You, Scum of the Earth aggro fiends, are at 18.2%, and just behind there at 17.2% is Combo. And I'm wondering why aggro and Combo fell off so much. I don't know if it's just aggro players,
aggro's too hard for a lot of people to play well. And that's the truth. That's the opposite of what a lot of people tell you, but that's the truth, is that it's hard to play. It's easy to play aggro in a mediocre way. It's hard to play aggro at the highest level because, again, there's no margin for error. And it's kind of similar with combo as well. Combo is something where you have to be patient to really learn a deck a lot of times. You're not going to be playing the game in the standard way if you're playing a combo deck. So that doesn't surprise me too much because I feel like those are the 2 archetypes they're probably the most difficult overall to play.
So there you have it, friends. That is your Wampa Cave poll of the week. Again,
people are going to hate that I said that, by the way.
Of course.
They're going to hate that take, but it's true. Deal with it.
Again, like having played for 25 years card games and whatever, and like I've been exposed to aggro decks. When I say that aggro, when I talk smack about aggro, it's not because I'm saying that it's not. It's too easy to play, and I find it boring, and I don't get the same satisfaction as I do when I'm making more decisions that are control-oriented decisions. I like to play by my own terms, but that isn't to say that aggro decks do not take the same amount of skill to pilot successfully. If it was that simple, if that were the case, then it would basically be the random amounts of people winning tournaments with the same deck, but it's not. It's the same amount of people. It's the same types of people playing aggro because it's a skill that you have to.
Everybody's got to have their preferences, you know. I mean, and that's I think one of the really important things to think about when you're designing a card game is you want to make sure that you have like those archetypes available for people to play. So you know, saying
I gotcha.
That is something. It's all, you know. You need it all. You need it all.
So I also want to. So there's two things before we get to the headlines. Number one is it's cold, so I'm wearing this beautiful. I'll call it a tauntaun pelt of a blanket over top of me.
You kind of look like you're ready to play for the band Weezer or something like that with that on. Yeah.
It's very warm, though. I love it. And the second thing is, I don't know if people can see it on camera, but your box of Jabba's Palace cards was replaced with what looks like a Life Day Wookiee.
That is true.
Can you bring that to us?
I just thought it looked better on the shelf. It was easier to sort of like see than the box of Jabba's Palace, which I feel a little bad about, but it's true.
Yeah, they can't see it on the.
We didn't talk about this before we started recording, but yeah, it is a Life Day Chewbacca action figure that was just released recently, and I thought, you know, from this good old Star Wars holiday special, and this is an official Star Wars product. Look at that, you got Hasbro and Disney on the background, so this is more official acknowledgement that the holiday special is a real and valid thing,
dude. So first of all, that series of figurines, I have the first like 2 waves of them because in the same way that all these collectibles come out, they're branded as exclusive limited runs. So at the time, I went out and I hunted them down, including the ultra rare, super exclusive Disney Celebration exclusive Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing gear. I actually managed to track one of those down. And I was like, I have the whole collection. I have all 8 figures plus the ultra rare chase one and the Darth Vader that only comes in like the playset display. I have all of those. And then they're like, oh, we're releasing new ones. And I was like, I thought that was it. So I gave up. But when I saw that one almost got me to buy another wave of those things because that thing is absolutely...
I'm not a big action figure person. I never really have been since I was like a kid, I guess. But I've got a couple of them. Every once in a while, a figure comes along that sort of like just captures my heart. And you know, come on. Now they got to release the whole set. I need the whole family. I need my Lumpy, Itchy, and Mala action figures. So Hasbro, if you're out there, you know, I'll give you money if you make those.
Yeah.
So you know, think about it.
Well. Yeah. It looks like he's coming out of like a Turkish bathhouse. Like he's got like this robe on.
All the Wookiees wear this red robe and they hold that like glowing sphere. And then they sort of walk into like a sun looking thing. And then the greatest moment is we find out when Carrie Fisher sings for us in the holiday special, which she had a lovely voice too, a lovely singing voice. She sings lyrics to the Star Wars theme. Who knew that theme had lyrics? Well, if you watch the Star Wars Holiday Special, it's out there, and it does. It's not on Disney Plus yet. You still have to find it by, let's say, less than official means, but it's on YouTube. It's not that hard to find, actually.
Wasn't it on Disney Plus? Didn't they upload it?
No, I don't know. It was never on Disney Plus. No. Not as far as I know.
I know what you're saying, though. Like, finding out that there were lyrics to the Star Wars theme is kind of like finding out after listening to, like, a McDonald's ad with, like, I'm loving it, and then realizing that it's an actual Justin Timberlake song. Like, it's a whole thing. And you're like, I don't want to, I'm not interested anymore.
It is?
It is. The
I'm loving it thing is the Justin Timberlake song?
Yeah.
So there was a Lego Star Wars holiday special, but the actual Star Wars holiday special is not available officially anywhere
yet. Yeah, it'll come.
You know, there's the famous rumor, the quote attributed to George Lucas at some convention, and which may or may not be true. He might have never said this, but the quote was that he allegedly told people at this convention that if he had enough time and a sledgehammer, he'd go around the world and smash every copy of the Star Wars holiday special.
Well,
And if you watch it, you might get some insight why, you know.
Between him doing that and Steven Spielberg crushing every NES version of the E.T. video game, I'm sure that that, by the way, if completely unrelated, friends, if you want a fun rabbit hole to go down video, like YouTube video wise, find out the history and finality of the E.T. Nintendo Entertainment System video game and the history of that game. It is.
I thought it was Atari.
Oh, was it Atari?
I think it was Atari, yeah.
Maybe it was Atari. I could be wrong. Ultimately, though, what a story. What a horrible story for the Earth, but still.
Yeah, it was the age of video game movie tie-ins that did not work out. Speaking of this is we're getting totally off topic now, but without Charmer here, we need to fill this time somehow. But so have you ever seen the movie Surf Ninjas?
It rings
early
a bell.
90s. 1993, at the peak of like ninja mayhem in the United States and maybe the Western Hemisphere in general, there was a movie made that starred Ernie Rice Jr., who was Kino in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze, and also was in the Donatello suit in the first Ninja Turtles movie during fight scenes. But I digress. But it was this movie was a really like so bad that it's good, but also just kind of like great. Just cheesy action film from the early 90s. It was made for kids, of course, but it was partially financed by Sega to show off their Sega Game Gear handheld console that was a thing back then. One of the characters has like mystical abilities, but his ability is to see like the future and stuff that's going on through his Game Gear by playing the Surf Ninjas video game. So that was another game that was developed in tandem with the film and then released around the same time as this film. They both kind of flopped. It was like a $7 million budget and only made like 4.5 million at the box office.
Holy crap.
But hopefully they made more at the video game. Who knows?
That's back when movies can be made for that amount, right? Like I was watching
low budget movies, sure.
It was late last night and I was going through this YouTube rabbit hole where I watched a video, top 10 failed TV shows of 1991.
That is very specific.
Very specific. I thought it was the 90s. No, it was just that year. They were pumping out all kinds of horse crap. But one of them was about a show called Baby Talk that was based on the film franchise Look Who's Talking.
Oh, I remember those movies.
Yeah. So that movie, like Look Who's Talking, and if you want to sort of put things into perspective, it came out in like the early 90s, like 91 or something like that, or 1990. Yeah. And the whole premise of the movie is that it's like John Travolta and I forgot who else, but she has a baby and you just hear the inner monologue of the baby. Like that's all it is. And it was pretty funny, but that took off. But putting things in perspective about budgets of movies, that movie grossed like $250 million. It cost like $8 million to make. You don't make movies for that much anymore. Like
it's a big hit.
It was a big hit. But the thing about it is, like, you think about it, even the most ridiculously mundane, do-nothing Bobo movies are still like $80 million to put together now. It's just crazy how these things have happened. But
so there was never a video game made of Look Who's Talking Now, though. That's the main problem. We never got our SNES Look Who's Talking Now video game.
No, but I think that over the course, like in the early 2000s, we got enough like Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen style video games and like Zack and Cody video games that I'm pretty sure we suffered in other ways. But let's go to the headlines, friends, for Star Wars Unlimited this week. I didn't comb as finely as I normally do because the Cunning stream occurred, which was it happened today actually when we're recording this, which is November 8th. Yeah. So that's all I have, more or less. I apologize. I didn't really comb through it. It's been a rough week, but ultimately the important part is that we learned about Cunning. And I watched that stream, and the most important part about this is, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is that the way they kind of tagged this is that aspect, to put into perspective, is that Cunning is the aspect about making your opponent uncomfortable and messing up their well-laid plans. And I like that.
Yeah, it's got that neat aspect to it where it's got removal, but it's removal for a discount because it sends things back to your hands, that kind of stuff. And in a game like this too, where resources build up turn over turn, having something bounce back to your hand after you've spent, nearly all of your resources or all of your resources playing it is pretty devastating. So it's some strong tools. There's also the resource manipulation aspect of it too, which is going to be really, really fun to play with. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty hyped about this aspect. There's a lot of neat stuff coming out of it.
There certainly is. So I do invite everybody to go check out the article regarding Cunning. Go check out the stream from FFG to make this a little bit clearer. They did drop nothing more in terms of gameplay related mechanics. They clarified some of the basic templating rules, such as if you are drawing, it's always off the top, and if you're discarding, unless otherwise indicated, it's always off the top. It's kind of just some of the cleaning up of the mechanics of the game. But we did get some spoilers, and we've got a bunch of spoilers this week, Doa. So would you like to lead us off into spoiler land?
Yeah, sure. Welcome to Spoiler Land, where the population of vigilance cards is just one this week, which is not Cunning. But we have Search Your Feelings, which is a 4-cost vigilance villainy card. Search your deck for a card and draw it, then shuffle your deck. So just straight up search for a card. We've got our tutor in our Magic the Gathering tutor in Star Wars Unlimited now. It's a villainy card, which limits it quite a bit. I wonder if we're going to get a heroism side version of card searching. I don't recall seeing one yet. So that's a little bit of an interesting aspect to this, no pun intended. But, again, tutors are always very, very strong. I could see this card fitting in very easily in a more control-oriented deck where you've got the board a little bit locked down. You can afford to spend 4 resources to find another card that's going to have a big impact later in the game, because you don't need to reveal it, so you're not really giving away any information by doing this. So for 4, it feels like a pretty good card in the archetypes that would support it. So yeah, I think it's neat to see how new games work popular or traditional game mechanics into their cards, and it seems like a pretty interesting one from Star Wars. Yeah.
Oh, it's great, and I get what you're saying in terms of will there be a heroism equivalent. I'm okay if there's not. I don't think that everything needs to be mirrored in that regard. I think that it's important to have these two aspects, these bigger overarching aspects like villainy and heroism, have their own strengths and weaknesses. And if there's a tutor ability here, then that's cool, because I think it was on the last episode where I mentioned it may have actually been in private, where I mentioned, I said villainy, command, vigilance. That sounds to me like the Esper of this game. It sounds to me like that 3-color control-oriented combo. Whereas I understand that Cunning will eventually slide into that, and I'm kind of reevaluating whether it's vigilance, whether it's command that comes out, or whether it's villainy in total. But ultimately here, having something like this, a tutor, when we saw the cards before, those big boys from last week, like the Devastator, the 10-10 drop, that to me is an end game piece. That is we're gonna play this, and we're playing it to win the game. If you don't find that piece, you're in trouble. So if your whole game is to ramp up to a big piece, but then you don't find it, all you're finding are the helper cards, you can't feel good about that. So sometimes Search Your Feelings, a card like this, is almost imperative to those late game big sort of Hulkbuster type cards.
Yeah. I'll go back to what I always talk about too, which is the art, and I like the art on this card. It's I like that the light from the lightsaber is lighting the scene appropriately. The background is not super detailed, but it's detailed enough to know that he's in the cave. We all recognize the scene if we've watched Empire Strikes Back, Everything's well rendered. So yeah, nice card art too. It's probably going to be another one that looks pretty good in hyperspace. I mean, I think the vast majority of cards are going to look pretty awesome in hyperspace, but this one in particular, I'm looking forward to see.
I do like this one. Luke looks a little bit like Joey Lawrence in this one.
For some reason, the Luke Skywalker head in the helmet reminded me of Taylor Swift. I don't know why, but it just kind of does. So I'm kind of like, it's Halloween, and he's killed Taylor Swift. Oh no! Well, he was wearing a Darth Vader costume, I guess.
I think she's rich enough now to warrant having body doubles, so we'll just say that it was a body double.
Like Saddam Hussein or something like that. Who's got a bunch of like body doubles just in case someone's out to get. No, I don't think she has to worry about that.
This one is was revealed by Scrawl, by the way. I also want to give thanks again to SwooDB for having these up and available. Go to swdb.com for deck building, spoilers, all that stuff. Go check them out. Next one. Now we're into Cunning, friends, and this is a 1-drop single aspect Cunning. It is a space unit called the Mining Guild TIE Fighter. It's a 1 attack, 2 body, fringe, vehicle, fighter. It says on attack, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. That, again, revealed by Scrawl. Okay, so first impressions. 1 aspect, 1 drop, 1/2. Stat-wise, garbage. But your 1-drops, in my opinion, unless you're a go-faced red deck wins type of deck, should be utility, should have some sort of greater effect. Paying 2 to draw a card, this is more of those, okay, let's accelerate, let's dig, let's find. The problem is I don't know whether, like, this card to me is a card that's going to have to wheel itself into a bigger picture type situation, like what I was mentioning, like building up to a Devastator or a big bad, if you will.
Sure.
Not super impressed, but I like the utility of this 1-drop.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be another one of those cards that's pretty good in limited because you're going to be looking for early drops in limited probably a lot of times. So being able to put down something in space on turn 1, you might be able to poke with some damage for a couple turns unless they're able to match. You've got the option, I think, which is another pretty good, limited thing where if you don't have a turn 2 drop, if you're somehow lacking 3 drops, you can pay 2 and search for something, or not search for something, just draw a card. But yeah, it's not a card that, unless you really, really need to have either a fringe vehicle or a fighter or something like that, unless you really need more cards of like this type or trait in your deck for a different reason, I don't know if you're going to be able to you're going to be including a ton of them. It feels like a limited card to me, which is what I've been, thinking a lot more now looking at some of these cards. But hey, I mean, in set 1, all bets are off, right? We don't know what we're going to have access to across all of these archetypes yet. So if you're playing, a space heavy deck that relies on fighters or fringe or something like that, then there might be room for something like that in this because, nothing wrong with dropping something in space on turn 1. That's going to usually feel pretty good.
I like it. We should let you guys know, again, when we'll remind you throughout the times that we are going to give you a more in-depth breakdown of the cards, give them like ratings and such, as well as more of an archetype kind of breakdown as the cards become all revealed. We don't want to give you and say like this card is good or bad because we don't have the whole picture. I was actually thinking about this earlier, and a lot of the discussion that goes around evaluating cards, it's like, okay, if you could pick a football team and like, are you going to bet on them to win or not? Unless you know what their competition is, you don't know, because I'll take the 0-16 Raiders or whatever, but if they're playing against a high school team, I'll put money on them. Like, that's kind of what we're at right here. So it's hard to evaluate.
Yeah, I mean, but that's part of the fun, right? Is the speculation and everything. So we're saying what our opinions are based on what we know. That is all we can do at the moment. So
sure,
I think that's just what it'll be. We'll tell you what we can with what we've got.
Deal. All right, next up, Doa.
Let's see. We got the Lothal Insurgent. All right, a 2 for a 3/2. But when played, if you played another card this phase, each opponent draws a card, then discards a random card from their hand. So this is really interesting, actually, because you can do it a couple different ways. Getting a 3/2 for 2 is just kind of a nice aggressive move. If you play this as the first card you play in the phase, you're not going to need to worry about the effect, right? Because it only comes into effect if you have played another card this phase. So you can either drop it right away, get a 3/2 for 2, maybe on your next action you get a value positive trade with something on their side. So I like it from that perspective. Then add into that, you can do the when played thing. If you've already done something else that turn, each opponent draws a card and then discards a random card from their hand. So while I don't love the idea of my opponent drawing a card, the random discard aspect of it, you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit, with And with it being a cunning aspect, with that sort of being Han Solo's aspect of it, the gambler's aspect, if you will, I like a bit of gambling there where you're saying, hey, maybe we'll get lucky and they'll discard something that's going to be that they really, really needed. So I think this card is useful in kind of like both of those scenarios. So I like this one.
Oh,
I think it's a pretty cool card.
Yeah, big time. To tell you sort of the impact of what this might mean, because again, it is particularly a gambling-esque type card because you are not guaranteed the result of what the on-playability. But I'm going to give you a little scenario that happened to me yesterday. I'm playing Hearthstone Arena, okay? My opponent has 8 cards in hand. Hand limit is 10. If you draw above your hand limit, that card basically is banished. It disappears. Yeah. I had a card that says both players draw 2. And in my head, I was like, well, I'll clog his hand. Maybe I get lucky. I clogged his hand, and he burnt a legendary card that if you kill it, it just keeps coming back and back. It's basically their win condition. And that, again, it's a gamble. There's no guarantee. But I took the risk because you're right. Because the amount of time they conceded after that, like that was their win con, and they couldn't get back from that. But these types of things typically happen much like, for example, in Flesh and Blood. If you hit somebody with Crippling Crush or a Pummel, they have to discard, or there's cards where banishing off the top as an assassin. Sometimes you hit their win cons, and that feels amazing. Like, milling your opponent in limited Magic. Like, you'll hit their bomb, and you're like, that is as good as a removal spell in certain cases. And the stat line for this, a 3/2, it's a Rebel, by the way, as a tagline. It's dual aspect, it's Coming Heroism, but if you're building around it, dropping the tie and then dropping this, they draw a card, shuffle their hand, and discard one, you might absolutely devastate their plans. And this goes back to the mantra of Cunning as they described it, which is you want to make your opponents feel as uncomfortable and uncertain as possible. And I think that Lothal Insurgent does an excellent job doing that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard not to find a useful scenario to play this card in, especially in limited. It's going to be another, good one there. But I think even constructed, this one, in set 1 at least, could see some play. So yeah, like I said, pretty solid looking card. Pretty cool to see out of a common. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, thank you to Spice Squadron. You guys can check out Spice Squadron, other great content creators, for spoiling this one. Next up, we have a base. I think the streak of requesting a base off of like the internet Twitter poll for Star Wars U it's been a base every single time.
That's cool.
I think it's cool too. It's the unsexy pick, but damn it, it's the most important pick in my opinion. I think that bases are so important.
I mean, they're so integral in deck building, right? So I think that's why everybody wants to see the bases, because they want to think about what kind of decks can I possibly build. Should I do this one? I just did the last one. You should do this one. We'll just go back and forth.
Sure. So this is Jeddah City. It's the Cunning base. It is a 25 health location. Tagline, or the tribal quote unquote, is Jeddah. So we're going to have other Jeddahs, but it's Jeddah City. It has an epic action. Give a non-leader unit -4/-0 for this phase. So you epic action, you make something a little less scary, and then maybe you tank into it. I really like this. This is honestly another target of opportunity kind of thing. And again, in describing what Cunning was meant to do, I think it was Tyler Parrott who mentioned that this is an aspect that wants to mortgage the future for the benefits of right now. It doesn't care about later. It wants to gain constant momentum. It wants to double down and let it ride over and over and over again. So Jeddah City is another one of, let's just -4 and -0 this. Let's take care of it. I don't want to hold on to this ability unless it, if it feels good. So
yeah. And it's a potentially very strong ability too. The question with all these 25 health bases is the ability worth it, And it's going to be a very skill testing type of thing where, if you, botch the usage of this ability, if you, say you do this and then they find a way to, do damage to whatever you're trying to prevent from doing damage anyway, then, then you're out 5 health for nothing, right? But, if you use this, when they're about to attack with something and it's a very crucial attack and they can't do anything else but attack with that, then this could be game changing, right? So, I'm very, very interested to see how all of these 25 health bases play out, because I'm not convinced yet if any of the abilities on the bases are worth taking the 5 health hit. But there's obviously going to be scenarios where there are, but I don't know if there's going to be enough of them. So it's a really interesting experiment with how they make bases in this game. So it's interesting to see this stuff. I'm just kind of curious how impactful it's actually going to be. How often we're going to see someone take that 5 health hit in exchange for that epic action. So
yeah,
it's a lot to think about.
I was having that kind of internal struggle as well when it came down to the value of bases versus the +5 health here. And I think that if you would, in my opinion, I'd take a 30 health base over a random like utility effect most of the time. However, unless the base was significantly dialed into what my deck is looking to do, like if there was synergy and combo elements there, like the -4 -0 here, the way I'm looking at it is it's to create a beneficial trade. It's like to sort of soften the blow on a trade, or it's to turn another card online, something that affects something that has like, if it has 4 or less like 4 or less attack, or like defeat a unit that has like 6 or less attack or something like that. Like if it brings something to earth that you can combo with another card, that to me feels right. Not to mention, we haven't seen all the cards yet. If there turns out to be a deck with a card that becomes super problematic, and there's a card that can deal with it, but it's limited by the fact that that card has X amount of attack value, then Jetta's going to be a good option. But for now, in my opinion, I feel like the 5 extra health feels good, but we'll see. Again, anytime that you can gain board control to your advantage, that is worth 10 life, frankly, more than anything else in my opinion. But
yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on it. Yeah.
All right, next one.
Shall we move on? Yeah. We've got No Good to Me Dead. It's a plan. It's an event and it's a plan. It costs 2. It's Cunning Villainy. It says exhaust a unit. That unit can't ready this round. So that is potentially pretty devastating because it includes leader units. Notice it doesn't say non-leader unit. So you could play this theoretically at the start of your turn. Your first action could be to exhaust their leader. Their leader wouldn't ready until the end of the next turn, until the regroup phase of the next turn, which is kind of crazy. Because it specifically says too, including during the regroup phase. So that means exhausted for the action phase. Regroup phase happens, doesn't ready. Then you get the next action phase, it's still not ready, and then finally the next regroup phase it can ready again. So you can really take something out of action for like a long time with this card, and at a cost of only 2, that is powerful. I saw this card and I was like, wow, all right, that is gonna upset people. Talk about making people uncomfortable. I think Tyler is gonna very successfully make a lot of people very uncomfortable when they have this card played against them. So well done there.
I want to know who the mastermind is who kind of was at the helm of Cunning as an option here, because I'm gonna go on a limb here. You want to talk about hot takes? You want to talk about a little bit of prognostication, Doa?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm going to say that, and it was confirmed that there will be bans and stuff like that. If there's a card that gets banned or errata'd, my suspicion is that this is going to be a potential early candidate for it because of what you said. Because they spend 10 resources to jam something on the board that's enormous, like the Devastator. You No Good to Me dead it, and now that card is worthless for two whole turn cycles, right? Yeah. So there's going, well, I mean, it has Sentinel, so maybe not, but you know what I mean. But like you put something big, and you for a minute fraction of the cost that they paid, you render it useless for 2 whole turns. Beyond that, you might draw another one of these. You might draw whatever. You're right. Like, Cunning is going to drive people bananas, and this card I think is going to be a prime culprit of that.
You know, I think you brought up a really good point, though, where if something has Sentinel, it's still going to be blocking. They still have to attack into it. So even if it's exhausted, it's still going to be participating, at least in a way. So there is aspects like that make this card slightly less powerful than it would be in other games. There's other things, too, where, like, we don't know if maybe there's going to be, reliable ways to ready cards that are exhausted, which that's a whole mechanic you need to be worried about, because that could lead to all sorts of, crazy shenanigans balance wise. But if that kind of stuff exists elsewhere in the set, then maybe that, reduces the impact of this card too. So that's something, whenever we're looking through all these cards too, we can see things that look like they might be extremely strong, and this card certainly does. But we don't know if there's maybe other things out there that we're going to find out about that, bring this kind of more in line and make it a little bit less scary. So at the moment, looks like a very good card if you're playing Cunning. It looks like a very scary card if you're playing against Cunning. But we need to see what the rest of the set looks like too.
I can't wait to play Cunning. Like, I know that I mentioned Villainy, Command, Vigilance, but I might be a 4-color fiend, man. I might pay the taxes. We don't know.
Hey, I mean, with our next card, I would almost I'd be very tempted to throw this in some other decks here. I mean, we've got well, you can do it. It's your turn. Go ahead.
Sure. It's a 2-cost event called Spark of Rebellion, which on the stream they said was the original name of this was supposed to be Sabotage, but they stuck with Spark of Rebellion, which ended up being the name of the flagship set, right? It's a Cunning and Vigilance dual aspect 2-cost rare event. Spectre is the tag on it. It says very simply, look at an opponent's hand and discard a card from it. This, my friends, is Thoughtseize. It's your standard black, look at your hand, discard a card of your choice kind of situation. This card, I think, is going to drive people absolutely freaking wild.
Yeah.
I think that this card is precisely in the right wheelhouse of rarity, potency, cost, a value, etc. I think that this card is a very good design. Obviously, it's borrowing from some other card games and predecessors, but a lot of cards will do that. But if you know Magic and you know Thoughtseize, it is an incredibly important effect, to the degree that, I mean, you and I, Doa, are lucky enough to talk with many Magic pros that still compete or have competed, who have played for years. I remember hearing from our friend Tannen Grace, who mentioned that there was a time where he got Thoughtseized in game 1 of a best of 3 on the first turn and just immediately forfeited. The reason being that he didn't want to give any information to his opponent by saying, I still have 2 games that I have to win. He'll look at my hand. My hand's not good. My chances of winning this game are practically 0. I'm going to scoop. Spark of Rebellion.
Nice.
Yeah, well, Spark of Rebellion is like, it's the selective nature of picking the threat that you don't want to deal with, and then also knowing everything that they could possibly do moving forward. That's huge.
I think this card's going to get banned. I think I'll say it now. I think this is the top of my list for potential ban candidates once the competitive scene gets rolling, because this card is just well, first of all, I've never really liked this type of ability in a card game. Being able to just go through your opponent's hand and get rid of something you don't like. It's too strong. Like,
sounds like a red player to me.
But the thing is, I'm not worried about it in the early game though. I'm worried about this in the late game. If you can, kind of incorporate this into another late game turn, that is just straight up game winning sometimes, right? If you're on like 6 resources and you use 2 of them to play this, and then, you derail their entire turn at that stage in the game, that is very strong. And I know it's a rare, and I know it's restricted by, being dual aspect and all that. But I don't know. I've never liked this kind of ability in card games, because I feel like my main reason is I feel like it's too anti-fun. I feel like playing card games, a big part of it should be responding to what your opponent has on the board with what you have in your hand, coming up with cool plans, mapping out your turn, and then executing your plan and being like, okay, that went well, how'd that go, reworking it. And so when someone can just dive into your hand, get all the information, and then remove whatever you need the most, it's such an unfun experience that I don't like it, frankly. I think it turns people off from card games. So just straight up, I don't like this card. I think it's probably going to be too strong in a competitive sense. I'd ban it. And yeah, I just don't straight up don't think this mechanic belongs in card games. That's a very strong opinion, but That's how I feel. Yeah, I think it's anti-fun.
I'm going
Card
to
games should be fun.
I'm going to borrow a phrase from a Flesh and Blood pro and Flesh and Blood analyst who said to me that card games are a zero-sum fun game. I can have fun at the expense of yours, and it equals 0 at the end of it. Like any fun I have has to be at your negative, your fun deficiency, as it were. And this is precisely it. We should do an episode. Once all the cards are out, we should do an episode of like our top 5 like ban radar type cards. And I agree. And I'm really worried that 4 of the 5 are going to be Cunning cards because of precisely what you said.
Maybe.
Well, the value return of these cards, like this, like the previous one, like any of the bounce effects, like Waylay, etc., it's immense because you're getting. And again, this goes back to the philosophy of mortgaging the future for gains today. If I bounce a big card, it doesn't go away. It just means I don't have to deal with it right now. I mean, it's the millennials of planning, you know? It's like, well, let's just do it right now and like figure and worry about it later. Or is that boomers? I don't know. But still, I would suspect, Doa, that you're right, that this card is gonna this whole aspect is gonna have the same kind of anger and angst that blue does in Magic.
Yeah, I mean, with this card is so good that if I was playing either Cunning or Heroism, I would include 3 of them and pay the tax. I think it's that good. I would pay 4 in a heartbeat to look at my opponent's hand and get rid of whatever is going to be the biggest threat, you know, because I feel like in a game like this, that's extremely strong. So we'll see. Like I said, I naturally don't like this effect in card games, so I'm gonna just wish it didn't exist. But I also think it's just gonna be too strong. So we'll see. I might eat my words later, but that's my current take on this one.
Well, you have one hell of a whopper coming up after this, but we're gonna do it your way, Doa.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That's a nice Burger King reference transition.
We're still looking for sponsors, so hey, man, we could be the Wampa Cave, home of the Whopper. So
Rodeo Burger, best fast food burger. I was gonna say it. Do they have rodeo burgers in Canada?
Well, we have Burger Kings. I just fast food in Canada.
They have rodeo burgers at Burger King though.
Well, I've never been. I've never had a rodeo burger.
Do you know what it is?
I don't know what it is, but like, can I guess? Can I just guess?
Sure. Yeah, guess. I want to hear your idea about what a rodeo burger might be.
I'm guessing it's gonna have like crispy onion straws, bacon. It's gonna have like Monterey Jack on it, and it's gonna have some type of barbecue sauce. Am I anywhere close to or does it just have onion rings on it?
You're pretty close, actually. I feel like you do. I feel like you're not being completely honest.
I just know what.
Sure you never heard of rodeo burger before?
I know what the formula is for any Western style burger, which is onion straw related crispiness, some type of Monterey Jack, and then barbecue sauce, and then so
it is just straight up a burger patty with 3 onion rings and barbecue sauce on it.
Okay, so the Monterey Jack, that's the add-on. See, they gotta hike up the price.
It should have regular cheese, but some places like way back when in high school and stuff, I worked in the kitchen at Burger King for a summer, and we put cheese on it, so it was cheese and onion rings and barbecue sauce. But I've noticed now sometimes when I get it, they just don't put the cheese on. So I don't know if somebody messed up somewhere, but anyway, you were very close. I was very impressed.
It's called shrinkflation. It's called shrinkflation. It's
so good though. The onion rings and barbecue sauce together. Yeah. It's like such a great flavor combination. I'm not a fast food guy at all. I very, very rarely have fast food. But if I do, if I'm on a long road trip and I just need to eat something in the car, I will generally try to find a Burger King and get a rodeo burger.
Wow, that's a blast from the past. There was this magical summer many years ago where myself and like 6 of my closest friends all worked at different fast food joints, so we never went hungry because whoever had the day off on those days would get together and then go visit whoever was working, and then we would all eat for free. It was nice. Burger King. I worked at Subway at the time. There's another place working at another sandwich spot. We had a manager at McDonald's, donut place. Yeah, we were absolutely stacked. That we would never pay for food all summer long. It was the best summer of my fat life ever. Was that?
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the best benefit I had from working at Burger King is that during your breaks you could secretly make whatever like Frankenstein creation you wanted to in the kitchen back there. You weren't supposed to, but
Yeah.
we did it, of course.
For sure, man. You should have seen the monstrosities I used to create at Subway, dude. I'd be like,
Yeah.
there's like 8 animals in here, and it's amazing. So let's go.
Yeah. That's wow. Talk about the pinnacle of humanity, getting to eat 8 animals in one sandwich.
I have like 8,
Wow.
8 branches of the food chain are all now between this garlic parmesan loaf. So let's go.
That is incredible.
That's progress, baby.
Well, on that note, let's talk about Cunning, the actual flagship card for the aspect. As usual, it's double aspect Cunning. It's cost 4 as they all do. We've got the solo art, and on the stream, Tyler did mention that they tried to have art from each of the different time eras of Star Wars. So this is your, I don't know, extra movie era. They've got the prequels, sequels, and OT, and we've got solo. So here's what it does. Choose 2 in any order, as with all the other Hallmark, Landmark kind of cards. Return a non-leader unit with 4 or less power to its owner's hand. Give a unit +4/+0 for this phase, which is interesting. Exhaust up to 2 units. An opponent discards a random card from their hand. So there's a lot of good stuff here. I'm a little bit surprised that it's give a unit +4/+0 and not give a unit -4/-0. But, you know, that's another thing where, hey, it's Cunning. You might not be expecting it, right? So, yeah, I mean, just if you're playing Cunning, you know, if you're going mono yellow, you're probably going to put 3 of these in your deck. It's going to be good.
This one feels like the most impactful of all the flagship legendary events so far.
Really?
And,
Okay.
I would argue as such because what other impact do you have of exhausting 2 units or bouncing a unit, discarding a potential card out of their hand? Like if they're only hanging on to 1 card, not to mention, think about it this way. It says choose 2 in any order. Let's say they have an 8/8 on the board, right? Like what is it? Like the AT-AT is an 8/8, I think it is. Epic event your base, make it a 4/0. Then you Cunning, so you bounce it, and then choosing the order you want it, it's I'm gonna bounce it, and then you discard a random card. But if they're holding on to no cards, that you just got rid of the 8/8 as for 4 costs. And now obviously it took some maneuvering and it took some quote unquote Cunning to pull it off, but I think that this is important. Not to mention, now we see some of the synergy of Jeddah City, where the 4 or less power, if there's an 8 power, you can Jeddah City it down to 4 and then bounce it. That's an option, right? So I think that this and the exhaust 2 units, it's just like, all right, I'm just gonna you can't attack, and let's go. Like you could potentially 3 for 1 with this.
Very strong. Yeah,
it is very strong.
I was I might have missed this in the stream too. Because now that I look at this again, I bet the case is that they put +4 instead of -4. Otherwise, you could just -4 and then bounce. So it might be too hard of removal for just 4 resources. So and they might have said that on the stream too. I'm trying to remember. I had it on the second monitor.
Well, so
I listened to most of it, but not.
They mentioned that the initial one was actually plus. I think it was +3/+0 is what they wanted.
Oh, really?
Or maybe no. It was always plus, from what I understand, is that it was always plus. So I know what from what they mentioned was that there was additional text they wanted to put in to sort of qualify one of these 4. I forgot what it was, but they literally, and the explanation that Tyler gave was that they ran out of space on the card, so they didn't.
Not
put
a lot
it
of
in.
space.
There's not.
I can see that.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
that's a legendary, baby. Hey, and
it looks good.
And let's talk about the artwork here, because this is the same artist who did Hera, the same artist that did the Jyn Erso card last week. It's Sandra Slavinska. So what is your take on this art?
I like this one a little bit more. I think I like the way she draws characters for the most part, because again, this one looks a little bit more clean. I don't know what happened with the Hera card, but this one looks good too. The background is still a little bit iffy for me. Like it kind of looks like he's in a foundry and there's like a bunch of sparks and stuff falling behind him. Like, is the bar he's in like in the middle of exploding? So the background I'm not 100% sold down on, but the foreground looks good. Yeah, I like it.
It feels to me like he's on Geonosis, where they're like building all the battle droids and stuff. And
Yeah, but there shouldn't be sparks flying all over the place.
no,
right?
but maybe he's in the break
Dangerous
room.
place to play with paper cards.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
but no, we have to go back to the previous card for just 1 second.
Sure.
Too. I forgot to mention that it's a Spectre card as well. So that means you can play it in a Harrison Dula deck that doesn't necessarily include the Cunning aspect and not have to pay extra for it. So
hell yeah.
Yep.
Sweet.
Just wanted to include that. A non-unit Spectre card. Kind of cool.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Next up is our good friend whose artwork was one of the original artworks that were revealed. This is, ladies and gentlemen, a 1-drop Cunning card, ground unit, Greedo. Slow on the draw. That is,
like the title there.
Yeah, that's very good. It's an underworld bounty hunter, 3 attack, 1 body for 1-drop single aspect. That's pretty good. When defeated, you may discard a card from your deck. If it's not a unit, deal 2 damage to a ground unit. So you mentioned Leper Gnome earlier. Leper Gnome that had the death rattle effect of deal 2 damage to your opponent's base. This is kind of the same with more conditions, but you're just doing the damage to a unit. This can be sincerely problematic because this kind of makes you worry about facing off against it with a unit. Even if the trade is favorable, you might trade like a 3/4 into this, and then Greedo's gone. But if Greedo rips off the top and finds a non-unit card, it'll do extra damage, or it'll snipe something else, take out a shield, it'll do something. There is value to this card, and it is an uncommon.
Yeah, I think it looks solid. I mean, yeah, 1 for 3/1, you're gonna get some nice trade value right out of the gate, like you talked about. But the when defeated, I mean, you discard a card, but maybe there's ways to play around that at some point. Then you get to deal 2 damage back to a ground unit. When I look at this, I think back to what is it? Is it C3PO? I think that lets you look at the top card of your deck or something like that. So
it's like 3PO and R2. Yeah, some one of those two. Yeah.
So R2 lets you, 3PO lets you like look and well, okay. Now I have to look it up.
Where are you going to look it up, Doa?
I'm going to FabDB to look it up.
FabDB?
FabDB. No, I'm talking. Wow. Okay. So I have a 4-month-old baby at home, and my brain does not work correctly because I'm only getting like 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. So sometimes words just coming out. So words just come out. So
you're going to SwooDB.
SwooDB, not FabDB. I go to FabDB for all my Flesh and Blood card needs. That or Fabry. Right. But SwooDB, I go for this. But let's see.
I will say, if you are a Flesh and Blood fan, go to Fabrary.net instead of FabDB. Fabrary is the way to go.
Oh, okay. All right.
I am not sponsored by them. That is merely my.
So here's what you do. You have Greedo out. Then you play R2-D2, who has a when played / on attack. Look at the top card of your deck. You may put it on the bottom of your deck. So you can kind of filter a little bit, kind of scry, if you will, set up your optimal Greedo turns. So there's already ways that have been revealed to manipulate this, and that's my main point with this, is that it's not always going to be as random as it looks on the card. You can construct things in a way where you can get maximum value out of this. So yeah, you can take the chance, but if your deck is built around it, you can do well too.
I have a little bit of grief with this card. Many moons ago, when the art was revealed, Charmer and I did like, okay, what do you think the aspects are? None of us said cunning, because we didn't think that the Greedo was a particularly cunning type of person.
That's a very good point.
I said aggression and villainy, or just aggression, as what I thought it would be. He's aggressive, right? I don't remember what Charmer said, but none of us said cunning. So that's...
I don't think I would have guessed cunning either. I wouldn't have said villainy, because Greedo isn't evil per se. He's just a bounty hunter, right? He's just trying to collect a bounty. Nothing wrong with that. Greedo is kind of the victim in this circumstance, but I think I wouldn't have picked cunning either, because he just sort of walks up in a place, blaster out that specifically has banned blasters. So right off the bat, he's upsetting the staff, and you're going up against Han Solo, he should have known better. Yeah. So not too cunning. I agree with you there, but the ability is very cunning oriented for the purposes of the aspect of the game. So I see it from that perspective.
But not least, hit us.
Yeah. We got Syndicate Lackeys, 5 resources, cunning only, 5/4 ambush, which means after you play this unit, it may ready and attack an enemy unit. So, yeah, I mean, it's essentially, it can be 5 direct damage to something on your opponent's side of the board. It can be something where you just pop it out, take out a smaller unit on their side, and then you've got a 5/2 or a 5/3 or whatever remaining. And that's something your opponent does have to take seriously, because if they don't remove it, that's a 5 damage threat potentially coming at their base next turn. So, yeah, overall, I think this is going to be a pretty strong limited card. When you're dropping something with 5 power in a limited game, I think that's gonna make your opponent sweat a bit. So I look at this, and I think Tyler said this on the reveal stream too, that this is a card that has a lot of limited value. And yeah, I mean, looking at this, comparing it to other similar cards in other card games, that seems to be the case.
It's very much a great limited card. It might not make the cut in certain constructed, but this is a card I would value high if I was within Cunning. I wouldn't pay 7 for this card, but I would happily pay 5 to drop it and immediately attack with it, like just to be that kind of greasy. It's very fascinating. I don't know what species that is on the card.
I don't know either. Isn't that one of the aliens from? It's either from like Solo or it's from the sequel. From
I think it's from. Remember that? Yeah, it's from The Force Awakens, where Han Solo is like stuck between 2 different pirate groups, and he's kind of like negotiating between the two, which is a great scene, by the way. I thought that was a great scene. I really liked The Force Awakens, and I know that people are going to hate me for it. I thought it was a good movie. I think it was the best of the 3.
I thought that it was definitely the best of the sequel trilogy, but that's a low bar. I mean, it's I think it was a good sort of reintroduction to the universe. But and I liked the characters, but yeah, that's I have a lot to say, but it's a lot of it's negative, so I'll keep it to myself.
Yeah, to Nerd Legion podcast, starring Doa and Monte Cristo, to get all of your other nerdy media. I'm liking this card. Again, I think it's going to be a bigger star in limited than it will in constructed, but doesn't mean that it's not that bad. This might be a card where, like, there's no charge mechanic. There's no go face mechanic in this game, as far as I know. It's more so rush, which is you can attack units. If this card had charge, then it's an all-star. Like, this card is really good. But the fact that you can't just deposit damage to a base upon deploy, you become a little bit more limited. And I'm not very thrilled about a 4 body. I think that, and like 5 to me is the bare minimum of safe, and 4 is just makes it that I worry. But again, if your whole mantra is gamble your future for the sake of the present, then this might be a card you like.
I think it's good for a common card. I think if it had 5 health, that would just present all sorts of breakpoint problems. So 4 health seems appropriate for attacking into something and then not, guaranteeing it's going to survive at the point in the game it can come out. So, yeah, I think it's mostly a limited card, but we'll see. Again, set one of a card game. Anything is on the table, really, as far as what might end up in a constructed deck.
Sounds good to me. So let's talk just for another minute or two before we go to the mailbag about Cunning and our impressions of it. And we promise you, once Charmer's back here, we're going to give you a little bit more of an in-depth look at the archetypes, how the aspects combine to sort of wedge into what those archetype umbrellas may look like. That is going to happen in the near future. For now, though, let's talk about Cunning a little bit and what impressions this gives you, Doa. For me, if I'm going to draw parallels, this feels like blue to me in Magic. Bounce effects, card draw, and cycling effects, disruption, denial, and just making your opponent feel uncomfortable. This, to me, also, like blue, comes with it a higher skill floor where timing is important, and making sure that you keeping track of your opponent's resources, what they're capable of, is going to be imperative. Much like in Flesh and Blood, when you're tracking what your opponent is pitching away and knowing that what sequence those cards are going to reappear and then identifying when it does, this is the same thing. You're going to look at your opponent's hand. You're going to bounce cards back. If you don't keep a mental laundry list of what they have at their disposal, to me, it seems like knowledge is power when it comes to this class. Knowledge is, or this aspect, and being able to translate that knowledge into advantage, that's where the skill floor kind of takes a nudge up.
This kind of feels like a support aspect to me, where it's without getting too much into that conversation we said we're gonna have later. It feels like a support aspect to me, where you're gonna run like a cunning package with multiple different deck archetypes, right? Where it's like you want to do this, your deck is supposed to do this thing. And so to support this thing, and it could be multiple different things with different leaders, you want to have this standard like cunning package that you run in your deck that is attached to the base you run, so that you can bounce things, get a little resource manipulation, all the stuff that we've seen that Cunning has done. It feels like stuff that's there to sort of support the main mission of your deck, which makes me very curious about what main like only Cunning decks would bring, because there's some stuff that's been pretty neat, that we've seen revealed for Cunning, with leaders and things. So I wonder what's out there, but to me, from what we've seen right now, aspect wise, it feels like a support aspect,
That's a good assessment, because not all of the aspects are going to be focal points. Now, they also showed off, said, hey, but we got like Han Solo as a leader. We've got the Falcon, which is going to be an impressive card. But
the Falcon's super good.
It is super good. I just don't feel like a lot of what Cunning is bringing to the table are build around. Much like in Command, you want to build up to the Star Destroyer. You want to get to an end game. Cunning, to me, a lot of it is more so delay and disruption to get to a bigger piece of the pie that you're looking for. But to me, unless they reveal something earth-shattering, I think that you're spot on here. I think that this is going to be the throw-in category where Cunning is going to represent like 20% of a deck list instead of the 33% that a triplicate might actually have. This to me feels like
possibly.
Yeah, like we'll get into all those metrics maybe later down the road.
Well,
but
there's a lot we haven't seen yet. So I think all decks are going to be, or all aspects are going to be, possible quote unquote main aspects for a deck. But I do think we've seen enough out of Cunning right now that I could look at like a lot of other archetypes I'm kind of thinking about with the game already and say, okay, I would run this with a Cunning package, just example wise, I would run like, the Luke Skywalker deck, right? When you're putting shields on things, you've got Heroism Vigilance. I'm putting out stuff on the board. I'm trying to play a slower kind of grindy game, and I'm running some Cunning stuff just to augment that, to bounce things, to, be annoying that way, or conversely, I'm running something like a, what's a good red leader to use an example here? Maybe,
there's
I don't know.
So is Sabine the leader? I think Sabine's the leader.
Yeah, Sabine's the leader, or like IG-88 or something like that, and I'm trying to play this aggressive play style, and so I need a little bit of protection for, the stuff out there, because it's going to be a little bit more fragile, a little bit more vulnerable. I'm going to need some shenanigans, need to, get into my opponent's hand to take out some key removal at the right time, so I could run a Cunning package with that. So yeah, I think it's got a lot of usefulness in that category. But so it does make me wonder, if people are going to build around it as a main aspect, what that's going to look like.
All right, before we move to the mailbag, one quick question. Do you think that this is going to be the most hated? Is this going to get the blue treatment from Magic? Is this going to be the most hated aspect in Star Wars Unlimited?
Just off the top of my head, probably. Depends on how annoyed people get by shield tokens. I don't know. We'll see.
That's a good add-on. All right, friends. Well, Doa, Charmer's not here, so you have plenty of shoes to fill for this episode. So I'm going to ask you. Let's just say, you show up to the Wookiee household. It's Life Day.
Oh,
you've got your glowing orb in your pocket.
All right.
You show up, you open the door, they're all wearing their red robes, and you look down, and you're not wearing your red robe.
Oh, no.
What do you say?
I've got a bad feeling about this.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about
Hey.
Quiet.
What?
It is the Bad Feeling Mailbag. Not bad.
Thank you.
Trying to remain topical, circling it back. That's one of the important elements of of comedy is callbacks to previous jokes.
Go.
They become funnier as they sort of gestate for a little while. So hit us with a mailbag question.
All right. Well, we got one this week from Lightsaber Larry. Welcome back. Does one need to have played the previous Star Wars card games to be allowed at the Cool Kids table when SWU releases? All jokes aside, is there any character or phase of a character that you hope to not see show up in Star Wars Unlimited? So we have kind of two different questions here. We got kind of a funny, serious but not serious question, but kind of serious at the same time. I think you will be cooler if you are aware of the other Star Wars card games. In my book, that would make you a cooler individual. Does that make you not cool to not know the other Star Wars card games? Of course not. You can still be cool and only know Star Wars Unlimited. It's just a matter of, are you cool or are you even more cool, right? So I wouldn't worry about it. But hey, there's a big wide world of Star Wars card games. So, the more you engage with it, the more fun it'll be. What's your opinion on that one?
I'll say this, Larry. Look, as somebody who has played the other Star Wars card games, somebody who is so intimately attached to Star Wars CCG to this day, the cool factor increase for me, it was felt. It definitely exists. However, look at me. It took me from a 1 to a 1.3. So don't even worry about it. The return on investment is not necessary. It's not worth it. I always, like you, Doa, recommend that people go check out Star Wars CCG by Decipher because it's, in my opinion, one of the best card games ever created, ever.
Easily. Yeah.
But no, you are always welcome, at least at our table, Larry. You can always play. You don't need to have that kind of expertise.
Yeah. So let's get to kind of the main question here. Just to restate that, is there any character or phase of character that you hope not to see show up in a Star Wars Unlimited? So this is kind of asking us for our sort of subjective lore opinions, I think, on Star Wars. Is there any version of a character that annoys you enough to not want to see, or you don't want to see for some other type of reason? What do you think?
Oh,
I'll let you answer this first. Go
I
ahead.
have a very important answer to this, and I'm keeping this within the framework of canon. Okay,
I think reasonable. Yeah.
It is secluded, isolated, on Ahch-To Luke Skywalker. I don't want to see that Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
and Mark Hamill doesn't want to see that Luke Skywalker. The fans don't want to see that Luke Skywalker because that's not, to me, Luke Skywalker. And I get it. It's not for me to decide what Luke is or isn't. However, Luke's ascent and Luke Skywalker in Legends and expanded universe lore that isn't canon anymore was much more fascinating, was much more refined, reserved, than this.
Almost like the character naturally developed in a way you would expect the character to develop, instead of being completely derailed by somebody else's mad vision for changing things for the sake of changing things. Wow.
It's almost, Doa, like the experiences of your past might shape the decision and how you grow as a person and character.
Oh, I don't know, Flake. That doesn't subvert my expectations at all.
That's a whole other podcast, but you're absolutely right, because sometimes the cute way to do a sequel or a movie is to take the character that everybody thinks they know the direction of, and for the sake of shock value.
But what if?
Yeah, but what if he was so angry and a goofball and sarcastic when he never was that in the past?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But what if the character just started completely not acting like the character? Ooh, I bet you didn't see that coming. Oh, wow, what smart writing. No, it's just stupid, all right? Bad. Yeah. Bad writing. It's bad writing. And I think you nailed it, honestly. Like, I will extend what you said to all of the big three, and even and Lando as well. Why not? We didn't really get good Lando moments in the sequels either. Just sort of showed up when he should have been in there from the beginning. But anyway, going back to the big three, right? The ones that were through the entire OT, right? Luke, Leia, and Han. All three of them ended up just really sad and lost and like just shells of their former selves in the sequels for no reason. Like Han Solo, the whole arc of Han Solo's character, going all the way back to, you can even include Solo, a Star Wars story. I don't care. Go ahead and include that, because Solo's journey was being this sort of scoundrel that discovered, like the value of good and friendship and fighting for a cause and not just being self-centered. And he went through this great transformation as a character, only to then in the sequels, just kind of discard all of that and go back to being a sad sack smuggler. Where it's like, no, that's not what anyone wanted. We wanted to see a more mature Han Solo that continued to grow, not reverted, right? They de-evolved the OT trilogy, right? Luke, in being the person who had unfailing belief that there was good in everyone, that everyone, could be saved, believed in it so much that his own dad cut his hand off and he still went back and helped redeem him. Suddenly, because maybe sort of possibly his nephew might turn to the dark side, we're supposed to believe he's contemplating killing this kid? Are you kidding me? And then he just runs away from everything? Come on.
Yeah.
How in the world do you make that a realistic arc for that character? And then Leia as well. Like, I mean, first of all, we just didn't get much Leia in the sequels. She just didn't really get a huge part in the story, which I'm fine, moving on to the next, generation of characters. But again, her character was kind of just this like beleaguered person in the New Republic who, like, she was one of the heroes, right? And then nobody listened to her, and so she just kind of went off and started her own like guerrilla movement against the First Order too. So it's like everything she fought for just fell apart, and she kind of ended up splitting with the person that she loved and going off and leading kind of a sad, depressing existence. So it's like, why is it Hollywood wants our heroes to be deconstructed like this and ruined like this? Newest Indiana Jones movie, he's a sad alcoholic because his child dies. Spoiler alert. Poor Shia LaBeouf's character, Rip Mutt, apparently died in Vietnam. So now Indiana Jones, we join him as he's a sad alcoholic. And then you've got Willow in the Willow TV show that's now been removed from Disney Plus because it was sadly not very good. Willow turned out to not be a great wizard after all. Oh, who knew? And he couldn't protect his village. And now, oh, isn't that sad? He's a ruined shell of a character. Like, why do they keep doing this? Why do they keep doing this to our heroes? Stop. Just let them age and grow naturally. We want to see the old and wise versions of these characters. We don't want to see the sad, dramatic versions. It's no fun. It's not realistic. So I'm 100% with you. I do not want sequel era big three.
So I want to just wrap this up by saying you're spot on about Han Solo, because the Han Solo and Spider-Man are my two 1A, 1B all-time fictional characters that I love, because they're so deep, or they were. The thing about Han Solo for me was that you have a smuggler who is in it for the money, doesn't care what, just cares about how much, and I get that. He's ruthless, he's a mercenary, he just wants what he wants. It took Leia Organa, a strong-minded, ambitious, strong-willed woman, to kind of slap him around a bit and be like, the world's bigger than your ego, and there's bigger things at stake. And he comes through, and that was sort of busting down the door, or busting through the wall that was put up there that he built after he was betrayed in Solo, right? Like, he had a love of his life that betrayed him, and so he turned into that version of Han Solo. Perfect, fine, I'm all for it, I love it. And then when Empire Strikes Back ends and you see him more accepting of a family, he's inside. He's no longer the lone wolf with Chewbacca, going through life $1 at a time, making a name for himself, worrying only about himself and Chewie. That's not it. Now he's got a bigger picture, and you're like, wow, I can't wait to see where this goes. And where does it go? Right back to A New Hope. And you're just like, oh, he's back to being hunted down by bounty hunters for bad cargo drops. Like,
they just erased his character progression.
Yeah.
Just like that. All right.
What happened? What the hell happened to him having kids like he does? And I will, spoiler alert.
They did have one, but that didn't go out so well, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is like, in the Legends, they have 3 kids, and the kids are Force sensitive. But in canon, he has one who turned out to be a really interesting character. And all things aside, I think Kylo Ren, as bastardized as that character became and how poorly it ended, was probably the more intriguing villain, where he was under the shadow of his grandfather's legacy, and he wanted to, out of anger, outdo it. He didn't want to achieve things for the sake of achieving them. He wanted to do it to spite his grandfather's legacy. He wanted, like, the whole thing of he's got Vader's burnt up mask. He's like haunted by that. He wants to be better than his predecessors. That is intriguing because Vader was one hell of an act to follow. But you see it, like that first scene where he captures Poe and he stops the blaster bolt midair as he's interrogating people. That's terrifying that you can do that. I'm like, that's why I think that The Force Awakens was a pretty good movie to, like, on its own. It set up a lot of good things outside of the original characters. Like, if the focus was to build up these characters, Finn, amazing. Poe, really cool. Rey but like, damn it, Kylo Ren and all of the others were kind of playing second fiddle to how badly they botched the sequels. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, so no sequel era Luke Leia and Han, please. Yeah.
Easy. That's it.
There you go. That's your answer.
All right, friends. That does it for the Wampa Bad Feeling Mailbag, friends. If you want to go ahead and contact us, you have a question, a comment, a suggestion for something you want us to talk about on the show, you can email us, wamparadiopodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at Wampa Radio. You can tweet at me at WatchFlake. You can contact Doa if you want to, at GGDOA. By all means. We're also on Discord if you want to poke us, no problem. That said, I do want to also remind everybody, thank you for the 5-star reviews. They are incredible. They're stacked, and we appreciate you. It does so much for us. But we want to also encourage you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us, all the alert nonsense. It does go miles for us. And we're not just saying that. It actually, curtain pulled aside, the algorithm wants certain things. It wants 5-star reviews. It wants follows. It wants interaction, comments, and stuff like that. That's how we get better. So thank you for already doing that. And we implore you, please engage.
That's right. I don't have a voice changing thing. I can't do the charmer thing.
I was going to say, can you fake it?
I can. No, I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could fake it, but we can just say it because that's what you had to say to tell your opponent it was their turn in the old Star Wars CCG. So
it was.
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you. We'll see you next time.